Happy Thursday, friends. And it being Thursday, you know what that means. We're live with a mystery wine here at Field & Main. Pouring this lovely red. I hope you are as well. If you are, chime in and let me know. Beautiful, huh? Just beautiful. Ooh. I like that nose. We'll get more toward that, of course, here as we progress through our process of deductive tasting. If you're joining, please chime in, let us know. Just like Bob and Dean have done. Curtis, you've already poured. Nice, great. Welcome this evening. Great to have all of you guys here. It was fun to see you guys a little bit over the past couple of weeks. All of you, in fact, including the Kubitskis too. Yeah, celebrating their anniversary, which was awesome. Gosh, I'm enamored with the nose. Just keep getting drawn into it. Renee, Bill, Debbie, hi guys. Super happy to have you with us, and Curtis, of course, too. Pleasure to have all of you with us. We're doing a red, as we typically do. We do like 3-4 whites a year versus the 8-9 reds that we do a year. And so we found most people want to blind taste red. So a white is more a special occasion in our world of tasting, but it's going to be a special occasion, I think, this evening because this wine smells wonderful. So, gosh, it's explosive right out of the glass. And you saw, for those of you that were on the chat just to begin with, I just opened it in its screw cap form and in this tin foil, so I couldn't see it, which is very helpful because you can get a lot off of a screw cap, especially if it's an Austrian screw cap and it has that red stripe and the white around it. The Ghostbuster sort of symbol of Austrian wine kind of tips your hand quickly and you know more than you should just by decapsule. So not trying to get ahead in that way. We're just going to evaluate what's in the glass. We can play the bottle game later, perhaps, if we have to, but looking at the shape and what's coming out of it that way as a cross-reference. But let's work what's in the glass right now. So what do you see when you're looking at this glass? The aroma is obvious. It's already out there. It's actually here. I can smell it from here, not even here. So we'll get back to the aroma. But what do you see when you're swirling this wine around? What kind of rim forms there? And then do you get tears? And do you have legs that hold? Are they substantial? Are they very fluid? You're correct, Matt. You're jumping ahead to a final guess, but you're saying it's not an IPA, and I think you're correct there. You can read through it. It's lighter. Yep. So a lighter skinned expression. It has some legs for sure, but they're thinner and they run pretty quick, right? And so not a super viscous wine. Medium ruby to me, Sarah saying. It's got an amazing nose. Yes. All right. So from a visual appearance, right, before we leave that and jump right into the nose because it's jumping right out at us, yeah, you can read through it, right? So it's not deep dark colored. It is that beautiful kind of reddish color, medium ruby, better put by Sarah. I don't see a whole lot of rim variation here. Do you? Yeah, maybe like a little hint, just a hint, but not enough to think this is an old wine per se. So 2 to 5 years of age, 2 to 4 years of age, something like that. A little bit of a watery rim, maybe a touch of alcohol there, and that profile being lighter, what this does for us, right, is gives us an idea that there are things that this is probably not. Is this Argentine Malbec? Probably not. Is this, Cahors Malbec from France? Probably not. Is this Tannat? Is it Petit Verdot? Is it Cabernet Sauvignon? Not so much, probably, based on the color and the profile and the ability to read right through it. And with then the profile too of these thinner legs that are shot down pretty quickly, it's not something that has a real ripe profile to it. So we can kind of cut out, let's say, the more robust end of the spectrum. So maybe we're light to medium in terms of body just by looking at it. Dean's noting too, Dean or Bobbin is noting that there's not a lot of alcohol on the nose. Sarah, absolutely throwing Zinfandel in with that Tanat. Absolutely, right? Hey, Trish, Andy, Kathy, awesome to have you with us. We're looking at this lighter red wine this evening. Probably we're saying not a Tanat, not Zinfandel, not Cabernet, not Malbec or Petit Verdot. It doesn't show that in its presentation. So we know already we're looking at, counterpoint, Gamay, Pinot Noir, something like that on that end of the spectrum. We could be certainly talking about Zweigelt, Saint Laurent, which we've done before. We could be talking about Italian varietal, Sangiovese, Nebbiolo, maybe something like that. So something that expresses a little bit lighter color in that medium ruby profile. So the nose is still jumping out, but nothing like it was like cooped up inside, and it just had to get out, and it went crazy. Right? It was a kindergarten class after a long afternoon of instruction, and they finally got released for recess. It just ran out crazy. The aroma is wonderful. So what do you smell? Fruit, earth, and wood. What fruit is here? What kind of fruit? What's the state of the fruit? What's the character of the fruit? Is it dried, kind of raisinated fruit, or on the opposite end of the spectrum, is it super tart, underripe fruit? Is it medicinal herbal fruit like you'd find in a cough drop? Is it candied fruit? Is it stewed fruit? Is it fresh fruit right off the vine or right off the bush? Yeah, it's got really pretty, like beguiling floral notes. And I use that beguiling term in order to cover up the fact that I can't really pick out the exact flower, and probably never could. But there's some herbal elements and a beautiful cherry note. I mean, pure cherry kind of. Yeah. Julie's adding 2 cranberry. So red fruit, tart red fruit, a little bit ripe red fruit. Figs or dates. You're picking up a little bit of a raisinated quality here too, Dean. Lavender, yeah, Curtis. There's a blue element here, kind of. Sometimes the flowers for me present in color. Like you'll hear me and others certainly talk about white flowers or yellow flowers or blue flowers. There's a color characteristic that presents in a sort of synesthetic way. Is anyone else picking up? So we've got fruit. We got this reddish fruit, cranberry fruit, cherry fruit. We've got a floral note, which should qualify as a fruity character too. I mean, it's the fruiting flower, right? The fruit comes from the fruiting flower. The earthy notes here, there's a little bit of a meatiness. Eucalyptus, nice. It's faint, but once you say it, then it's almost impossible not to find it. There's a dusty quality here, though. It's like your leather-bound book in a dusty library. There's a little earth, forest, wood, like a cigar box element. And all that kind of references maybe a little bit of oak on this wine. The earthiness is coming out a touch more, yes. The fruit's still present, but there's more dimension coming into the aroma. This wine is awakening and sharing more and more. Okay, so fruit, earth, and wood. We probably have a little bit of everything there. We have fruit. We have that earthiness, that sort of forest hints, the woody note. We have maybe a touch eucalyptus. We have an animal-y kind of quality there. What is that? It's like sweaty leather, kind of, like horse saddle, dark roasted coffee. And that dark roasted coffee, that cedar note, there's an indication perhaps that we're looking at a little bit of a wood aging profile. So we have our fruit, we have a little bit of earth, we have a little bit of wood. Let's see what we find on the palate in the way of verifying what we've smelled or finding something completely different. The side of the saddle, I think that's on the horse. It's like a wool, a wet wool, Julie. Yeah. That's an intriguing wine. It's like we'll get to taste, but there's tomato leaf, kind of tomato skin. That's interesting. That's an interesting wine. Let's talk about taste as opposed to flavor. So quite tart, higher acidity, more acidic. That's coming through from Julie and from Dean and Bobbin, all the Kavitsky's perhaps. Yeah, tart. There's a tartness about this. So like, do you remember we've tried in the past, we've tried some Senso and we've tried some Carignan. Senso in particular had that kind of sharp tone quality to it, had a little bit of earthiness. So you can throw that in the mix here. You know, why not? The medicinal nose is also increasing. There's a sourness. Let's taste it again. When you're tasting for that sourness, is that pure acidity, or sometimes you pick up a little bit, if it's an old world wine, it can happen in a new world wine for sure, a volatile acidity, and that sort of can present a little bit in the way of a nail polish remover in the wine. It sort of strips away the fruit. I'm not finding that here. I mean, there's ample fruit, but the quality of the acidity on the palate is more sour, definitively so. Mm. Yeah, like a less ripe fruit sourness, but then there's like a middle core to this wine it has density, right? It has almost ripeness, but then it doesn't come back to that. Dean's prompt in the conversation about palate weight, right, in the body of the wine, saying this is 2% milk, so skim milk, 2% whole milk. This is sort of in the 2% camp. This is a medium-bodied wine, but it has light notes on kind of either end of the experience of tasting it, and then the core is where there's some density, but that lingering quality of acidity almost wipes away the wine, leaving a fine residual of a little bit of tannin. Are you picking up on the small? I mean, I would say this is not very tannic, but there's a quality of slight tannin there. Sarah and the Kavitskys are throwing out the idea of an Italian varietal, but perhaps not Nebbiolo. And I think that's absolutely something we need to consider. I mean, I think there's, you know, Senso, Southern Rhone, there's Italian varietal. We should be thinking about Pinot Noir too, and Gamay for that matter, just because we should with this profile and work our way out of it. Sangiovese maybe. There's fine grain tannin. There isn't sort of that orangey hue though that you can pick up from Sangiovese. My first taste was kind of disjointed. It had that wonky acidity, that little bit of tannin, the fruit kind of core, sort of beep, boop, 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 beep, bouncing all over the place. And the second and third sip, maybe with a little bit of oxygen, with a little bit of swirling, it has softened a little bit and kind of calmed down into itself. There's that, for me, a really pronounced green leafy element. But it's tomato stalk. It's not the tomato itself. Maybe you could argue it's the tomato skins, or green tomato, but which is all to say that kind of in concert with the red fruit tartness, there's an underripe character here. Maybe some of what we're picking up on would be what we've talked about in the past, little whole cluster element. So perhaps there's some stem inclusion in the fermentation and the pressing, and we're getting a little bit of that sinewy green tannin that can come from the stems and the seeds. So what else are you tasting on the palate? Are you picking up fruit? Is the fruit there? And has that mint element, that eucalyptus element come to the palate, to the forefront? Mm. Yeah, I mean, the Carignan, the Senso, the Southern Rhone, I think there's good cause to consider that. What else should we consider? Given the profile that we have of a medium ruby, sort of medium bodied, maybe medium minus, low tannin but fine, high acid, obviously red profile here. Alcohol is not huge. It's there, but it's not overly prominent. So in the 13s, let's say 12 and a half to 13 and a half, I would say, comfortably guessing. What grapes should we consider? We talked about what we wouldn't consider based on the visual alone, the Tannat, the Petit Verdot, the Malbec, the Cabernet, the Zinfandel, not in the running. So where do you want to take this? And it sounds like we're all kind of headed more old world, but that eucalyptus note that was thrown out earlier, that would take me to Australia, to South Africa, maybe, to somewhere in some places in California. But I don't typically get it in the old world. It's still not super prominent for me, but there is a little bit of a mint tea mixed with a black tea coming out now. What are you smelling? Playing the wine game, the bottle game, the screw cap, Australia, certainly in the running. Somewhere cooler in Aussie. That's interesting. So like Mornington Peninsula, Pinot Noir, cooler site. I don't think we're talking about Shiraz, right? I don't think we're talking about, I mean, Grenache. We have experienced Grenache from a cooler site, a sandier site. Santa Barbara, Santa Cruz, again, maybe Grenache. I mean, it could be a Rhone varietal from the, one of the Rhone Rangers or the Rhone acolytes in the Central Coast kind of area. That's an interesting idea relative to California. I think they'd be really playing up the profile here of this whole cluster or partial whole cluster stem inclusion. Maybe a cool kid Gamay from Oregon. It doesn't present like Pinot, right? Does anyone else think this is Pinot? This is where I go. I mean, one, Julie just put a Pinot Noir in from Patagonia, and it's difficult to give us Pinot Noir because we all should be able to pick up, pretty easy relative to other varietals. So I don't think it's Pinot. Ooh. What about Senso and Pinot Noir, Pinotage? The cross of the two. South Africa. Is this Pinotage? It doesn't have that sort of rubbery note that a lot of bad Pinotage can have. So South Africa, Pinotage, I think you should consider that. Why not? Julie, you were actually thinking that. You get credit for saying that after? Yes, you do. You get full credit. Pinotage, it is an option. Grenache, maybe the Senso from Southern Rhone. It does seem a little light, right? Yeah, it seems a little light. There's no tar. There's no kind of concentration. Um, it's So it's an. I think you've got to consider it like we just did, right? So it could be Pinotage because we're talking about Sensa, we're talking about Pinot Noir. They're a blend. We mentioned South Africa from some of that eucalyptus note. All right, so you had these pieces like, all right, this is saying potentially this, but what we know about Pinotage, what we've tasted about Pinotage, might give us a bit older Pinotage. So great, like all the deductive stuff leads you to a certain spot, and then you evaluate that spot, and maybe not, right? We're going more savory and kind of not as fruited as it's open. And I think that's your point there, Dean. It's starting to diminish a little bit. There's that black tea, there's that stemminess, there's that, tomato leaf, there's still that earthiness. This is like the pot of loose leaf black tea that you brew, and it's after you've poured the leaves out, or poured the tea out, excuse me, and the leaves have remained and they're sort of wet and musty. There was that woolly note, that kind of sweaty note. Hmm. So maybe France, maybe Central Coast California. Let's say it wasn't one of those, or let's just focus for a minute because there was a call earlier about Italian, and maybe Italian, but not necessarily Nebbiolo. And I think that's fair. That cherry note's there, not there. There's not like kind of that rosy note. There's more that lavender before, which has sort of dissipated a little bit. The 22-minute is upon me, which means the wine's going to change. It's time to pour more. Barbera, Dolcetto, Sangiovese. I don't think it's that, but it's, it livens up again when you pour again. Like sitting in the oxygen in the glass as it sort of diminished and dropped in the glass with my tastes, it sort of faded a little bit to Dean's point. But then it kind of revives after you pour a bit more in and becomes exciting again. Hmm. Hmm. It's a little fuller, a little more complete from start to finish. Waking up, the acid's still very high, right? Wow. It's a little bit more knit together. So on the Italian side, is it Nerello Mascalese from Sicily? Is it, I don't think we're looking at Aglianico or Montepulciano, for example. Could she have gotten, I don't know. I mean, Pinot Noir from Italy, Pinot Nero, kind of from the northeastern part of Italy, over by Slovenia, in the Collio, near the Veneto. Could it be, we've tried Corvina, could be Corvina, and Corvina being a grape that grows, like we had this a year plus ago, maybe even longer, Bartolino, which was delicious. And we've had Corvina in Valpolicella. So there's that kind of option. I generally think there's going to be a little bit more purity to it, but Poulsard, something from the Alpine region, kind of north or from eastern France into Switzerland. They have high acidity. They present like that. Pinot Noir from Tasmania. I think that's a very cool call, and a cool climate. It would be pretty cool if she pulled Pinot Noir again. And I think it's a fair guess. It's a fair call, right? There's a quality of whole cluster, Pinot Noir, cool climate, red fruit, a little earth. you're not in a bad place if you call that. The high acid's there. The tea. I'm wondering where I should know the tea. Like, is the tea now? There's like roasted bones. Like there's. Yep, I get you there. The light-bodied Rhone blend and grape. So Sanso, Carignan, maybe both, right? Pinotage too. I don't know. Yeah, I'm like searching for the smokiness, right? That smoky quality. Mm. Curtis, you've got a flag. You're wondering where to plant it. This isn't an easy one to plant in. I think it gives us, it's an interesting insight into how certain wines can be connected when you don't think about them connecting. Like, how would you connect a Southern Rhone, maybe even Provence kind of Carignan or Sanso, with Pinot Noir from Tasmania, with Corvina from the Veneto, Valpolicella maybe, right? Like, those aren't wines you like necessarily think about in the same thought process, but they all have a viability and have a through line of this acidity, a little bit of earth, that red cherry fruit, medium-ish body. Makes for an interesting way to kind of begin to develop those connections in your mind that help you with blind tasting as you go and perceive one thing and can take you to a couple different spots as viable options, and then do what we did say with the Pinotage and rule out. But I don't, it smells Italian now to me. I don't know, guys. What do you want to do? Where do you want to plant your flags? You know, at this point, maybe take a last thought about what it isn't. Yeah, this is a confounding wine in terms of that, Curtis. To your point, Curtis is noting that, you know, everything he gets is countered by something else. There are discordant parts about this, especially from the nose to say the palate, but they're all obviously in one thing here. And I don't think, you know, sometimes when that discordant thing is happening, we're thinking about a blend. I'm not picking up blend as much from this. Zin Primitivo, interesting. Dean's calling with Uzbeki Pinot. Man, if Julie pulled Uzbeki Pinot, would you ever let her live that down? That would be pretty incredible. There's a little bit of that eucalyptus leaf. I'm between, I think, I mean, I like the idea of the Sanso thing right off the bat, Southern France. And the Sanso thing with the idea of thinking about Pinot Noir brought me to Pinotage. And so I'm back and forth between Pinotage on the lighter side of it, the more delicate expression of it, and doing something like Corvina in the northeastern part of Italy. Tiraldigo, that has more structure, more power. Austrian Pinot. Yep. Gamay. I think, I don't know, it doesn't have like the fruit characteristics of Gamay like up front in a way that I don't know, it could be Gamay. I think you have a fair guess there. You have a fair guess in Gamay. You have a fair guess in Pinot Noir from some places that have a little bit of stem inclusion and cooler elements like Austria, like southeastern Australia or Tasmania. I think you have a fairly viable profile for something Italian, northeastern Italian, Corvina. Not so much Nebbiolo, not so much Sangiovese. So I think there's still a fair argument for Pinotage, even though it's not presenting real prototypical characteristics of Pinotage. They're fainter. And a lot of the other things about this wine are not faint. So it makes you wonder if that's the right call. I think Valpolicella generally, though, I'm not sure I'd get this much acid. And it would be more like I don't mean this in a bad way, but like easier. It would just be easy. And this is like, you have to work at this one a little bit. It's not super compelling. Like it doesn't draw you in. It does from the nose, but on the palate, it's like, whoa, whoa, not too fast, right? You've got some thorny bushes that you've got to work through to find the fruit, which is altogether appealing. And then one's super ripe and wonderful, and the next one's a little bit tart and off and not fully ripe yet. And so it takes a bit of working at to appreciate this. It would be wonderful with cuisine, I think, too. It's not your easy drinking cocktail wine. If this is Pinot Noir, for example, I would not source this for our by the glass selection. For the person who wants to have a glass of Pinot Noir before they have dinner, this is not it in my mind. And again, that's not to denigrate the wine. I like it. It's you just have a different profile. All right, so time to pick, time to plant a flag. More cedar popping out, so maybe a little bit more wood. I'm gonna go with, because I like the idea of the blending of the two, the Senso and the Pinot Noir. I'm gonna go with Pinotage from South Africa, more youthful, so 2021, 2022, 2 to 4 years. You guys already peaked. Am I close? Am I getting there? Screw cap would work for Pinotage from South Africa. Anybody else want to throw themselves in the mix before I ruin it by opening the bag? Shoot! Oh, look at that! The coastal region, so western South Africa, Radford Dale. This is Venom, Pinotage 21, 12% alcohol. That explains a lot, right? That's pretty cool. So that 12%, like if it was 13.5, we might be getting a little bit more of that tar, that richness. Dean, we got it, man. This is super helpful by virtue of tasting with you guys. Because there's that beautiful kind of nose. Man, that nose is gorgeous. Like this is kind of interesting to think about in the world of Pinotage. And I've had a few now since my first experiences with Pinotage, which I gotta say were a little off-putting for me. Like that burnt tar kind of burnt rubber note. One gentleman explained it to me, one grower explained it to me, that it was just, that's overcropping. That's just too much. It's a little bit like, say, in Virginia too, the Chamberson kind of conversation, where it's really foxy and it wants to grow. It really has no problem taking its environment and maximizing its potential in any space, just growing and growing. It has to be kind of restrained, kept back. They've certainly done that here. I don't know, does it say anything about low intervention winemaking, which may be a way of saying there's a little bit of whole cluster, but really a fun wine, a neat one. That's fun. Thanks, guys, gals. Wow. What would you have with this, you know? I'm thinking about, we have this dish right now on the menu that is kind of bouillabaisse inspired, mussels that have been preserved, tomato broth, fennel elements, so a little touch of greenness there. There's trout that's smoked in the hearth, like grilled in the hearth, but it gets a little smoky because it's over the coals. I think this wine would maybe shine with that situation. Yeah, I agree, Sarah. This is a fun Pinotage, and one that would maybe suggest there's a lot more Pinotage to try out there as people are trying to figure out what to do with this grape and how to appreciate it with nuance and character. It had a beautifully expressive nose that belongs in the heights of wine. The palate a little bit wonky, but softening a touch. Oh, the pasta with rabbit ragu. Yeah, that would be lovely, Dean, for sure. Yep. Bacon wrapped figs with goat cheese. Guys, yes. I had this dish once. Tarver King, who I used to work with, he used to make this like leg of lamb that's really, really braised, but the lamb would sit like on some pickled feta with a lamb broth around it, and the broth was scented with cinnamon. And I think that would be, I mean, the lamb wasn't like super powerful. It wasn't meant to be the aggressive part of it, but you had a little creaminess and tang from the feta, this red wine pickled kind of feta element there. So it was acidic, it was sharp. And you had that lamb note, and then the cinnamon would play well with the spicier touch. Gosh, that'd be fun too. This wine offers possibility with respect to what you would do with it at the table, and that's fun. I think it'd be fun at Thanksgiving. It's a neat wine. Really glad Julia pushed this one tonight. That's fun. And so fun to try another wine that's close to Pinot Noir because we don't oftentimes spend as much time on the lighter end of the spectrum. So perfect choice. Really, really enjoyed doing this with you this evening. Thank you all for coming, for joining. Let's do it again. I don't know, next month. Until then, I hope to see you in here. If I don't, then I'll see you again at the end of next month, the third Thursday. And until then, drink some great